are again. And there we are again. Thank you so much. I hope you saw some really inspiring digital innovations from the South. We also know there were some problems, some connection problems, some problems with getting the right people in the right group. Sincere apologies for this. I mean, it is, of course, an experiment for everybody. We're delighted that so many people could connect, and for the people that didn't connect, check the chat, because everybody that got a really nice, professionally made video and complete with all the contact data and so forth. So it's over here in the chat. Go and connect to the people you didn't connect to before if something happened there. Maybe the internet wasn't fast enough. Anyway, that happened here as well, by the way. This morning we also had problems connecting. So there you go. Anyway, I hope you are still here, all of you. And before we continue, I'd love to know who's here, not from Europe, but the rest, you know, anybody who's not from Europe. Could you just put your location in the chat? So we have some idea of, it's mostly Asia, Africa, South America. So just where you are. Where you are, yeah. Addis Ababa, Lagos, New Delhi. Let us know, so we see where you all are from. Okay. What we're going to do now is talk to 3 of the jury members that actually selected the 30 most inspiring digital innovations. And together with Margreet van der Pijl, who organized the whole process. And we're going to talk about, okay, so very interesting what is happening in these countries, very interesting innovations. What can we do, all of us, to make sure that more of this is happening, that digital becomes something that is not only used, but organized, built, developed locally as well, because I think we all agree that that's important. Now, let's meet our panelists. Can we have them on screen? Excellent. Now, left on the top, Mark Kamau from Kenya. He's a designer, founded the BRIC Foundation, and he has been developing hardware. I mean, hardware is an interesting problem, it's an issue. We're going to talk about this later on. Then we have Minyas Anwar, who's the chief storyteller. What a lovely title. From Bangladesh, for Better Stories Limited, but he also does Seed Stars Dhaka, he does the Grameen Phone activities, he runs an angel network. If you're in Bangladesh and you want to do a company, check Minyas, it's very important. And then we have Rachel Boondegene. I hope I said that correctly, Rachel, probably not. Oh, sort of.
Really basic.
I should have practiced beforehand, my apologies. A social entrepreneur from Ethiopia originally, founder of the R&D group, RBD Consult, and business partner at Ortex Sport. Quite a list of activities. Now, the 3 of you have not only looked at everything that was sent in for the Medes, but you are also active yourself in this field. So this conversation will be about 2 things. But first of all, let's just very quickly ask you, what was the most inspiring digital innovation that you felt was the most inspiring of the most inspiring? What is the thing where you said, this is something new, I've never seen this before, this is excellent, this is something everybody should know about? Okay, who wants to go first? Think. Oh, yeah, no, I didn't tell you before I was going to ask this question, but okay, what was the one that stuck out? I know, and all the...
yeah.
Go ahead.
I don't remember the name, but it was a panic button watch made locally. It's not a new thing, but it was very interesting because what we know here, it's connected with Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, but they thought locally because most people do not have, girls who only have like small Nokia kind of phone. So you can actually send alert text to your family in the neighboring area. I think up to 6 people can be alerted about your situation. I thought that was very interesting, to be honest, because they actually consider the local context. And considering the safety of female in African continent, I thought that could be a scalable business actually.
Excellent. Yeah, Margreet, you probably know what they're called, right?
Yeah, I'm not so good in names,
okay.
but you can find
somebody,
it on the website.
If you are out there, introduce yourself in the chat. Put yourself there and say, "Oh, that's me." You know, go ahead. Mark, what did you think was the most interesting one? Not the best one, the most interesting one. The one that you think like, "Hey, there's something interesting happening here."
Yeah. While it wasn't new, but I also like the idea of aggregating financing for smallholder farmers. So investing in agriculture, crowdsourced from local investors, and then getting a return on investment later. I thought that was a pretty neat idea, and it's very local and it's easy to, to scale.
And Minyas, is there any particular company project that stood out for you?
Right. Before I do that, I must share that I was struck by the fact that the concurrence of thoughts and thought process across continents, a lot of things that, we used to think that perhaps is happening in Bangladesh. By being part of this process, I realized that, a lot of other people are doing similar things in Africa, for example. And I was fascinated by almost, all of them. But one thing that I would say, is very simple idea, but I thought is a very timely and very related and very relevant is the pregnancy journey. And I felt that it's very intuitive. It's very simple, but very, very, timely, something that cuts across continents, countries, religions, race, gender, and very important, something that is truly scalable.
Interesting. I especially like that you mentioned this connection between different areas where everybody is, trying to invent what really works on the ground and how much we can learn from that. I actually would like to continue with you because when we talked before, you mentioned that one of the barriers that we see, and that's across the world, is simply access to internet, access to electricity, the basic access stuff. What can be done to overcome it? And you mentioned a project in Bangladesh where you are based that is super interesting in that respect. Minyas, are you still with us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah, just wondering. Sure. I mean, I think one of the big things is access, simple access to digital.
Correct. So I think what has been happening, not just in Bangladesh, but around the world, is we have started to tackle some of the biggest basic service needs and biggest development challenges through technology. And what was typically in the sphere of development, and the governments and NGOs and development organizations were tackling, for example, access to livelihoods, access to small kids, access to education, and then all of that are now starting to come into the sphere of startups. And when startups are doing this, what I find fascinating is they're not only providing...
Sorry, Mark, don't put, it looked lovely, but if you put two computers on, we'll get the echo, so thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Sorry, we had a power problem and the computer went off. So
okay.
Yeah.
Very happy that you're still with us. Minyas, finish your thought.
Yeah. Sure. So basically, what's been happening is a lot of development challenges are now being addressed by startups or starting to begin to be addressed by them. And I think as they do it, they're bringing more efficiency and more innovation. I would give the example of SoulShare, an energy startup from Bangladesh. And what was not hitherto possible to provide electricity access to remotest of the islands, for example. And then, of course, we all know about solar, but what if, there is a mini grid between all the recipients of solar and to have, access electricity being traded for those who need it. And those kind of innovations are, I think, is now at the forefront of the development strategies for countries like Bangladesh. And I'm fascinated by what can be possible and how things can be scaled with technology. And of course, with the scale possibility comes responsibility. And also, there are other questions like, are the local solutions going to be scaled only within the countries? And what happens when, international players come into the play? So a lot of questions there. So perhaps I pause here and we look forward to rest of the conversation and talk more about what happens when global players come into the space where, as a local player, you are trying to innovate and scale locally.
Yeah, very interesting thought, and also very interesting that, in your view, we've talked a lot already in this conference about civil society and companies and governments, but you feel that those startups who are basically economically driven are really at the forefront of innovation right now. But when it scales up, you need some sort of government interference, or you need some social thought behind it as well, right? But at the moment, it's super interesting that there's a real business there to service everybody out there to get them electricity and internet. I mean, it's starting up. Rahel, what do you feel is the most important, you know Ethiopia very well, what is the most important barrier at the moment to have a vibrant, local, internet, digital culture? Not saying there isn't one, but what could help it grow even better and be stronger? You are on mute, you have to, yeah. Thank you.
Yes. Obviously, ecosystem in Ethiopia is not as big as it can be. I mean, we are 110 million people. We probably have less than 50 ICT companies. So there is a lot of potential for the country to tap into the knowledge of other African countries or Asian countries as such. The biggest challenge has been the preparation of the government to understand the need of technology. It's only because of COVID that things are sped up, but we used to have difficulties to access mobile money, and we still have issues having digital solution being produced locally. So we are merely dependent on open source kind of technologies, which might bring a security issue and privacy issue. I'm not sure how prepared the governments are, in general in Africa properly, to actually catch up with the leapfrogging that we have been talking about the last decades, that I feel is potentially good, but unless we have structure that helps the system to develop, we will be really facing challenges. So my feel is like, I think it's about time that the government invest in education, which is one of the most important. The government gets prepared in actually having the local ecosystem developed properly. But there is also a big lack on general access. It's access to finance, access to information, access to market, access to talent. So the talent being like the general people you see in ICT, they are very, very motivated about what they do. I think it's Africa-wide or maybe global-wide problem is that mostly they are tech people. So they know how to produce, they know how to build the system, but they lack the talent of scaling up or attracting finance or pitching their business properly. So there is a big need to help them develop their team properly, not seeing them as only an investment, but really see them to flourish. You see probably we'll talk about the available financial products that are not really entertaining the need of these investment companies. But in general, the current situation is that businesses are unable to grow due to the things I mentioned. So I don't know if it's time to talk about solution, but there are some solutions we talk about, but I think let's keep it this way now.
Okay, well, we'll definitely need to talk about solutions, but Mark, let's hear from you first. I mean, you tackle an even harder problem maybe, hardware. You want to develop local hardware. What are the barriers that you confront right now? And, let's after that talk about potential solutions. But first of all, tell us a little bit about, I think it's interesting for those that don't know, the easy access Wi-Fi tower that you built and what happened there. And tell us about the problems you have with hardware development.
Yeah, so what we see today is that part of the reason that it's very difficult to connect people to the internet is because the infrastructure that connects people is very expensive. For example, today we still have 4 billion people across the world who are not able to adequately connect. And if you look at Africa, there's over 800 million people. So it's a big problem. Over half of humanity still cannot, it's not an African problem, it's a global problem. Yeah. And here in Kenya, over 75% of people in Kenya, while there is some sort of infrastructure, are not able to connect. So one of the reasons is because it is very, very, one of the reasons is because it's very expensive to buy this infrastructure from big Chinese firms, for example. And so, for example, a 4G tower costs around $250,000 to actually put up. And so you can imagine if you're a company, you can't put that where there are poor people because you can't recoup the cost. What we decided to do is to create hardware ourselves that allows for people to connect to the internet affordably. And so instead of a tower, for example, costing $250,000, we have one that costs $20,000. And that also uses open source technology, meaning you can deploy it in other places. But the regulatory environment that you need to be able to, for example, offer 4G services is highly monopolized. So you need a spectrum license. And for you to get a spectrum license, the government has to allow you to get a spectrum license. And of course, there are players in the market who don't want you to get in the market because of whatever reasons. And so it becomes a political policy reason, a policy conversation, a political conversation. And there are barriers like that. And of course, making hardware in Africa is also difficult because of lack of mature hardware industry.
So the problems you describe to a certain degree are governments not doing what they should do to provide better access, better education, better access to capital and all these things. What can civil society do? What can citizens do? Are there solutions that are based there? I was thinking that maybe in the education field, since education is now certainly not limited to whoever has a local position as a teacher, the internet, the YouTube and everything. People get their education from all kinds of places these days, if you have access. But are there other local solutions, civil society solutions that could actually help overcome these barriers? And in the meantime, I'm also looking here, because if there are questions coming in, let us know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, because I'm not watching my telephone.
Yeah, I should say, both people here watching their telephones, they are actually looking at the questions in the chat. So they're not doing their private emails or anything like that.
Actually, a good question.
Okay, let's hear the question.
It's something somebody said, but it's somebody said not only the access, but the affordability use is also important, as Bangladeshi people have quite good access even in remote areas.
So there's internet, but you can't afford it.
Yeah.
That's also access in a way. Mark.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the most important issues. In fact, when you look at the research, it shows that number one problem for people accessing the internet is digital literacy. It's the biggest problem. And then the second most important problem is not infrastructure. The infrastructure is there. Like most places have infrastructure, but affordability is the issue. And so we have started a business model, for example, at Brick, where we give people access to the internet, but the person receiving the internet or using the internet does not have to pay with money. So for example, if you are a World Health Organization and you want to see how many people are washing their hands, you will come to us and you will pay us, and we'll put a survey where we say, if you answer whether you're washing your hands, you will get 1 hour free internet. So then you pay by your attention, not by your cash. And this model has allowed for more people to get over the affordability barrier, because they can come to our network, they connect, and then they do a simple digital task. And then for having done the digital task, they get access to the internet free. And so then it means that the economic barrier is not there. We have a B2B model where we the person trying to ask them questions pays so that they don't have to pay. And I think we have to think about these creative models to be able to allow more people to join the internet. And through this model, right now, we're the biggest public Wi-Fi organization in Africa.
Fantastic, and fantastically creative solution also to this issue of access. Rael and Mias, do you have examples or solutions, or where should we find solutions? Rael.
Okay, sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. I mean, for me, it is more of a political intent, I would say. Mark was talking about, affordability and access versus infrastructure. So I would like to believe that the infrastructure, whatever it exists at the moment, is good enough for us to democratize the access. So in a lot of countries, we see the bandwidths are unnecessarily kept unutilized, and they're exorbitantly priced. And also the political intent is not there to allow more people to break the monopoly. So as a result, I think everyone who could have been benefited from access and affordable internet, they're not getting it. And I would like to put it in that way. However, having said that, I think Bangladesh has made a remarkable progress, particularly in terms of accessing education and healthcare, very basic but very important services, and also very, let's say, the rights of citizens to have access to this. And now, because of COVID and because of concerns around physical interactions, now it has become, I think, truly the right of citizens to have affordable internet and being able to utilize it to go to the schools, hospitals, and markets and everything from their mobile, from their devices, by using this internet. So I'd like to put it back onto the responsibility of our leaders and our civil society, and we must act and we must do everything we can to make sure that we take best utilization of whatever that exists today. I personally believe we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and we don't have to go and have more infrastructure right away. Yeah. We can just make sure that it is being used more appropriately.
It's there, it's just not evenly distributed. It's just, it's available. Rael.
Yes, my take in this is, I was actually going to talk about the literacy of digital literacy, and being connected doesn't automatically mean you're actually utilizing the system as much as you want. I think the majority of people in Africa use it for social media, for Facebook or other sorts, because they don't need that much speed as such. Probably YouTube does. So what happens is that unless we actually educate our people to use the internet the way it's meant to, we could actually have people being toxic by information that is not necessarily positive. Talk about fake news. So because the system, the social media are so filtered in the way that only information that is needed is posted to your feed, the chance is very big that we create a community of people who are probably not actually getting the information that are intended to be. So I have been watching a movie called Social Media Dilemma. I would recommend everyone to do so. It's really, really scary how that is happening. And it's really scary if we see the way it's developed was never meant to be for developing countries, where community never been a problem. So social media was built to create community, but we still have the community feeling. And now suddenly people actually are connected online, but it's not the way it's meant to be. So that's the risk I see. What the question you raised previously was like, what is the room for developing organizations to work toward this sustainability? Is I think we have to start to look at developing countries as co-partners. I mean, I've been in the spectrum of sustainability international partnership for the last 15 years, but we always talk about it, but there is still a gap between creating common goal for each other, seeing everyone as an equal partner, than perceiving these countries to be a recipient of help, but really a contributor to a change that we need. And we need to take the youth with the change, obviously. But I think to start with, hopefully it's already taking place, is really to discuss on an equal level, think about the locally produced solutions which are available everywhere, try to connect it rather than indeed reinvesting the wheels. These are some of the things that I see that the civic society could play a role in.
I think that throughout this is very mature. Mark, and then we actually have a question from the audience. Mark, you wanted to... Oh, we have 3 questions from the audience. Excellent. And we have 10 minutes. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things we've noticed is, for example, here in Kenya, young people who go online sometimes don't use it for like the internet is powerful. You can build your skills, you can develop yourself, you can connect with others. But then, of course, there's also the negative side of the internet. So one of the things we've been doing is partnering with GIZ. We've been developing a digital literacy toolkit, so that we deploy internet to new places responsibly. So, because sometimes you go to areas where people don't have access to internet or didn't have infrastructure or access to internet before, and instead of exacerbating a problem that exists or introducing, sports betting and all this, how can we then say, oh, here is the internet, and these are the things you can do with it that actually can help you grow. And you're not just a net consumer of information. You can also share knowledge with the world. And so how do we create that mindset that it's a powerful tool for yourself, not just to go, or not just the negative effects. So we normally do that. We're developing that toolkit with the aim to spread it across our network so people can actually also learn how to use it responsibly, talking about privacy, talking about how to use it for self-development and to sell or to learn and so on.
Fantastic example. And also, again, anybody out there that says, interesting, ask Mark, because he can share. We have 3 questions from the audience. Let's hear them.
The first one is actually for Mark. Mark, it's coming from Mika, based in Finland. Mark, could you see, for example, East Africa becoming a hotspot for producing digital hardware, similar to the zones in, for example, Asia? And what would need to happen to take place? Or is the use of robots or artificial intelligence changing the game?
Okay, let's hear. So, Mark, sorry. Can we hear all 3 questions? Because then I can know how much time everybody gets, because we do want to answer. Can we hear a second and third as well?
Yeah, the second question is coming from Mohammed Sahid Ullah from the University of Chittagong. Many critic opinions says the extension of digital technologies in poor countries is for the exploitation of the poor. What is your opinion in this regard? And if yes, how can it be avoided?
Okay, good.
And the last question is from Sol Kabali from Safe Bengal, one of the Midis. How can Africa support its young innovators?
Okay, fantastic range of questions. Mark, Rahel, Minjas. Mark, you go first.
So yeah, I wanted to understand, the question was about, is it just, there's a part of the question which I missed.
Yeah, so the first question, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it said, could you see, for example, East Africa becoming a hotspot for producing digital hardware, similar like in zones in Asia? What would need to happen to take that place, or is the use of robots, artificial intelligence changing the game?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I think that for that to happen, we would have to have a lot of policy shifts, because some of the laws, for example, here in Kenya, are still from the 1963, where you think about industry as an assembly for cars or big industry. But now people are manufacturing microchips, people are manufacturing IoT sensors and so on. So for that to happen, I think that there would be 2 things: the development of skill and development of skill in Africa and government policy shifts. But I think it's possible. We have been making hardware here, even in the tough conditions. And the fact that we are the biggest public Wi-Fi organization in Africa, even with these difficult conditions, imagine what would happen if there's an enabling environment and there's this skill. And there's a lot of young people who are smart as well. So I think it's definitely possible. But I think that there would need to be, indeed, investment, but also in skill and policy shifts from the government.
Excellent, thank you very much. Rael and Minyas, let's start with Rael. Are these companies moving into lots of countries as a sort of exploitation of the poor? Is that something you worry about? Or Minyas, maybe this is closer to your network in Bangladesh where that is happening? Minyas.
Sure, thank you. So I think it's quite a juxtaposition of paradoxical sort of discourses. On one hand side, this internet is creating access for people who did not have access to things like healthcare and education and, let's say, microcredit before. And also, I think it is starting to eliminate a lot of divides between rural and urban. At the same time, at a global level, what we are seeing, the big companies, the GAFAM, Google's, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, they're creating their own, domains and dominations, and that is, I think, something that I'm quite nervous about. And while I talk about the access being a factor of political will for countries like Bangladesh, but also I think at a global level, it does require a lot of working together. Rahel mentioned about developing countries coming together. I think the world's conscience need to be aware of the possibilities of all of this, and also the distribution of access and affordability. This also needs to be added with equitability and democratized access. Because it's not just about, I think, devices and the connection, but also the point of digital literacy, for example, how to take best advantage of it. So a lot of it, the infrastructure is perhaps there, but how people would be able to know where can they go for the right kind of access, right kind of education and healthcare. So I think that needs to be bridged. I wouldn't say that a lot of the exploitation that perhaps is referred to is intentional, but I think the system, as we are learning, we are also trying to understand, how this could be eliminated. So I would say that, this is an evolving space, and perhaps in the new era, the civic society has to come forward and point out all of these emerging possibilities of the divides being widened, and we need to put the world leaders at check and responsible to mitigate these problems. I would put in that way. Thank you.
There's lots to say. Rael goes first. Rael, you go.
Yes, what was the question again? The last one.
Well, the last question was about what can we do for the young? How can we have the young people in Africa?
Youth is my passion. I've been working with youth for some time. Like I said, I think the biggest challenge that we have millions of people coming to the market every year. We are not able to absorb the amount of people coming to work every year. So what I see as a possibility in the innovation spectrum is that we need to educate people to actually become more active in the gig industry. So working from, like our employees in Ethiopia actually perform tasks for companies in the States. So it's not common. It's the business process outsourcing sector is not really used as much as we wanted. There are so many creative people, but they need to be connected somewhere, somehow, to the market. So there is a potential for these young people to be employed by international organizations. COVID have shown the chances of this to be very, very reasonable, because there is no physical presence needed for someone to perform any tasks, because people are judged by the delivery of their tasks rather than their performance every day. So that's something I see, but they need to be equipped with skills that is really of 21st century. So that also means that the education system should become more practical and something that actually meets the current need. So that also means we cannot afford having curriculum which is 10 years old to be working for Ethiopia or any other country, by the way. So it means all the education curriculums should actually be more practical, education ways. But they also have to be offered an opportunity to actually go on internship. Majority of people do not have the opportunity to go on internship. We can expand the possibility of young people to have jobs during study so that they actually have developed their skills. And you know from being in the Netherlands that most of our children go to school and work by the year of 14, 15. They learn the skills of being on time, earning their own money, and are more respected employees when they graduate. So there is a really lack of technical and theoretical education to meet the market need. So there is a need for us to invest in youth on education, practical, work experience.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, there's so much more to discuss, but we have to wrap up this discussion here. So all three of you, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Stay around. Questions in the chat can also be answered there, after all, because we're going to wrap up this morning's session. Thank you so much again.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Okay.
All right. Well, back to the studio here in The Hague. As said, we're going to wrap up, but my sidekick on the other side, tell us, what do you take from this morning?
Well, for me, it's a great learning journey, which is one way very inspiring, because looking at all these inspiring initiatives from Africa, from Latin America, from Asia, I really think, well, let's encourage this. Let's put more effort in this to get this off the ground. The other and there's two challenges too. One that were just discussed: the challenges of literacy, the challenge of affordability, but also the broader challenge of conducive policies, of adequate funding, because you would like to prevent inadequate funding overtaking these initiatives, taking them into the wrong direction. And so there's a lot of challenges there. At the other side, there is also let me look at our own organization, an internal challenge, and that's on inclusion. We have seen some hiccups with the internet, and of course that's the techniques, but also, and we got it from one of the movies, we don't use subtitles, we don't use icons, so there is a lot of people, and we only use the English language. So there's a lot of people that are not included in this whole session. So I think that's also a learning thing for us, and to elaborate for the next time. So that's, in brief, my own learning experience this morning.
We want to include more people in this conversation, which is incredibly important to have. With that, this plenary part is finished, but you are still out there. So what's going to happen now? As said, we have a new session, the last session of the day, 2 o'clock Central European summertime, which is with Jeremy Hymans, fantastic speaker on the local power and the digital journeys of the Partos members. So come back for that. But between that time, first of all, go in this chat, share your IDs, talk to each other, and then you can be part again of one of the tables. And the table is randomly assigned. You get to meet the people that are now part of the Partos Innovation Festival. And I would implore you to just try it out, because you will meet some super interesting people, and you can share your IDs and pick up new IDs. What happens is you get randomly assigned. The youngest person at the table is the designated moderator. So the youngest person at the table, so you can check out who looks young. That's the moderator. And that moderator can just ask the group a question. And the question can be, okay, what is the biggest challenge? How do we overcome it? And then you can share your own IDs and connect to each other. So I hope you're going to see each other in the platform, and we'll see you back at 2. Thank you very much.